Ethan Ward and the Curse of Black Coral Island. Chapter 1. The Map and the Legend. It began not with fanfare, but with a package left on Ethan Ward's London doorstep on a rain-soaked morning. The brass tube was dented and scarred with age, sealed with brittle wax bearing no insignia. Inside lay an ancient parchment, its edges frayed and faintly smelling of salt water and decay. The map it contained depicted a chain of Caribbean islands, their coastlines traced in fading brown ink, with one landmass circled in crimson, Black Coral Island. Along its edge, scrawled in an archaic hand, were the words, "Beware the Curse of Black Coral Island." Ethan's interest sharpened instantly. He knew the legend well. Every archaeologist did. Black Coral Island was said to be the last stronghold of Captain Elias Drake, an infamous pirate of the early 1700s. Drake, notorious for plundering Spanish treasure fleets, allegedly vanished with an unimaginable fortune and a crew loyal enough to bury his secret with their lives. Sophia, Ethan's partner and expert in ancient scripts, joined him at the table, tracing her finger over the ornate borders of the map. Strange glyphs and occult symbols were hidden within the drawings, far older than any pirate era. They suggested a blend of Caribbean native spirituality and imported European superstition, hinting at something more than gold, perhaps a relic. Marcus, their trusted logistics expert, wasted no time securing transport and supplies. Within days, they were flying to the Caribbean, heading toward adventure, yet unaware they were being tracked. Victor Kane, a wealthy and ruthless private collector, had been following Ethan's career for years. Known for acquiring rare artifacts at any cost, Kane had been searching for Elias Drake's treasure himself, and this was his opportunity to strike first, or steal from those who did. Chapter 2. The arrival. Black Coral Island emerged from the horizon like something torn from another era. Its volcanic cliffs rose sharply above the turquoise sea, draped in thick jungle that looked impenetrable from the shore. Rusting wreckage of old Spanish galleons rested on sandbars around the island, a testament to its treacherous reefs. As Ethan, Sophia, and Marcus landed, an unsettling silence greeted them. There were no birds, no wind through the trees, only the crash of waves and the distant echo of something moving far within the jungle. Marcus marked their location and unpacked their supplies, while Sophia examined a large coral formation shaped like a skull, eerily similar to one depicted on the map. The path to the island's interior twisted through dense vegetation and jagged volcanic rock. Strange markings etched into stones revealed that this was no ordinary pirate hideout. Elias Drake had constructed his base like a fortress, blending Caribbean voodoo iconography with crude 18th century engineering. As they moved deeper inland, Ethan spotted remnants of wooden watchtowers and traps, long deactivated, giving a grim glimpse into the paranoia of men guarding forbidden treasure. Chapter 3. The Vault of Bones. Hours later, they reached a vast cavern entrance framed by pillars of black coral fused to volcanic rock. Inside, the temperature dropped sharply, and the faint smell of salt and decay filled the air. The cavern walls glistened with mineral deposits and fragments of shattered pottery. In the center of the chamber lay a massive stone door engraved with Elias Drake's sigil, a skeletal hand clutching a coral-encrusted cutlass. Sophia discovered that pressing certain coral-shaped indentations on the door in sequence unlocked a hidden mechanism. With a grinding roar, the door opened to reveal the Vault of Bones. Skeletons of long-dead pirates, some still clutching rusted weapons, were scattered around piles of gold coins, pearls, and jewel-encrusted relics. At the center rested a black chest carved from ebony and coral. But before Ethan could examine it, a series of bright floodlights blinded them. Victor Kane stepped from the shadows with half a dozen armed mercenaries. He had been shadowing them since their arrival. Kane's reputation for ruthlessness was well earned. He never hesitated to kill for what he wanted. His grin widened as his men seized Ethan's group and claimed the treasure chest. Chapter 4. The Betrayal. The chamber shook as the ancient mechanisms gave way, and water surged up from the fissures in the stone floor like a beast long held back, now free to roar. The air grew heavy, thick with moisture and the metallic tang of panic. Ethan's pulse quickened, but his mind stayed sharp, cataloging exits, weapons, and the position of each of Kane's armed mercenaries. Kane, standing over the obsidian idol, laughed despite the chaos. His voice echoed through the vault, sharp and arrogant, drowning out Sophia's warnings about the curse inscribed on the idol's base. He treated it like a trophy, holding it high, the ruby eyes of the shark-shaped artifact glowing eerily in the flickering lantern light. Ethan made his move, subtle at first. He shifted his weight, loosening the strap of his satchel to swing freely, and caught Marcus's eye. Marcus, already coiled like a spring, understood. On Ethan's silent cue, Marcus launched forward, knocking over one of the mercenaries with the full force of his shoulder. The man fell into a pile of gold coins, his weapon clattering across the floor. The vault exploded into motion. Ethan swung the strap of his satchel, striking another guard across the temple, while Sophia kicked over a supply crate, scattering ropes, climbing gear, and water canisters. The sudden confusion broke Kane's smug demeanor. He barked orders, but the sound was nearly drowned by the cavern's low groan as ancient supports cracked under the new pressure of rising water. "Move!" Ethan yelled internally to himself as he grabbed Sophia by the wrist and pulled her toward a narrow tunnel branching off from the main chamber. Marcus, close behind, scooped up a fallen flare gun and fired it into the ceiling. The burst of light and sound startled their attackers long enough for the trio to vanish into the passage. The tunnel was tight, barely wide enough for two people abreast, the walls dripping with centuries of condensation. Water surged after them, rising from ankle-deep to knee-deep in seconds. Sophia stumbled, and Ethan caught her before she could fall, pulling her upright as he pushed forward. Behind them, Kane shouted, his voice twisting with rage as his remaining men regrouped. The metallic clack of gunbolts echoed through the tunnel. But a deafening rumble silenced everything. A slab of rock, dislodged by centuries of hidden stress, crashed down and sealed the passageway. They emerged into the open on the island's northern cliffs, gasping for air. Above them, the sky had transformed. Moments ago, it had been a balmy Caribbean evening. Now, it churned with swirling black clouds as if night had fallen prematurely. Lightning flashed in quick succession, illuminating the foaming seas below. It was as though the idol itself had called down a storm in response to Kane's greed. Rain slammed into them, warm and heavy, soaking their clothes and plastering Sophia's hair to her face. The wind howled, whipping palm fronds into chaotic spirals. Ethan glanced back toward the cave entrance in time to see Kane emerging, clutching the idol against his chest like a prize. His expression was triumphant, almost unhinged, as though the storm validated his power. "Get to the tree line," Ethan urged his team silently as he pulled them toward the cover of the jungle. Marcus kept his head low, scanning for high ground, while Sophia clung to the strap of her satchel, protecting the notes she had made about the vault's glyphs. Down on the shoreline, Kane's speedboat roared to life. The mercenaries jumped aboard as waves battered the hull, but Kane didn't hesitate. He throttled forward into the open water, eager to escape with his prize. That was when the sea itself seemed to rebel. A massive wave, easily twice the height of the boat, rose unnaturally fast and crashed down, flipping the vessel like a child's toy. Men screamed as the ocean swallowed them, and in the chaos, a dark shape sliced through the water, a dorsal fin longer than a man's arm. The shark circled once, its black fin trailing ripples like a blade before vanishing beneath the foam. The storm had summoned more than just weather. Something primeval had awakened. Ethan watched from the cliffs, his chest tight with the grim realization. Kane had unleashed something beyond human understanding. Whether the idol itself had power or the curse was psychological didn't matter. The result was the same. Kane was gone, dragged under by his own ambition, leaving behind wreckage and silence broken only by thunder. The rain intensified, pounding the earth until the soil began to slide in small rivulets of mud. Ethan led Sophia and Marcus to an old pirate watchtower they had noticed earlier, now little more than a crumbling silhouette on the cliffside. They forced open its rotting wooden door and huddled inside, drenched and exhausted. From the watchtower's top floor, they could see the coastline, shattered trees, overturned debris, and the unnatural calm of the waters where Kane's speedboat had sunk. In the distance, lightning illuminated the skull-shaped coral formation that had first welcomed them, its hollow eyes staring blankly toward the horizon. Inside the tower, they sat silently, listening to the storm rage on. The idol was still out there, its power unresolved, and Ethan knew instinctively that their journey was far from over. The betrayal had cost lives, and perhaps even sanity, but it had also revealed a truth they couldn't ignore. Some treasures were buried for reasons no map could explain. Chapter 5. The Curse of the Idol. The storm raged through the night, a relentless assault of wind and rain that hammered against the fragile walls of the pirate watchtower. Ethan, Sophia, and Marcus huddled in a corner, their clothes clinging to their bodies, their breaths visible in the chilled, rain-soaked air. Outside, the Caribbean island no longer looked like the lush paradise they had first encountered. It now resembled a hostile, alien world, torn apart by forces they couldn't control. When dawn finally broke, the storm subsided, leaving behind an eerie silence. The trees dripped steadily, the saturated earth squelched beneath every step, and the once vibrant calls of tropical birds were muted. It was as if nature itself mourned what had transpired. Ethan stood at the watchtower's window, scanning the shoreline with binoculars salvaged from Marcus's field kit. The wreckage of Kane's speedboat littered the reef like shattered bones, and no signs of life stirred among the twisted metal and splintered hull. Sophia climbed to the top of the tower, her face pale but resolute. She carried her notebook close to her chest, the pages protected by a waterproof sleeve. The glyphs on the vault warned of a curse tied to the idol. She whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the distant crash of waves. Ethan could see her mind working, already piecing together the puzzle that had brought them here. The idol, the vault, the unnatural storm, and Cain's sudden demise. Marcus emerged from the lower level, carrying an old pirate spyglass, the brass dulled by centuries of corrosion. He passed it to Ethan, who trained it on the reef again. Something caught his eye. There, half buried in sand near the wreckage, was the idol. Its obsidian surface gleamed faintly in the morning light, untouched by salt water or debris, as if it had been deliberately placed there. Ethan's instincts screamed caution, but he knew they couldn't leave it behind. Not only was the idol historically invaluable, it was dangerous. If someone else were to find it, a treasure hunter, a black market collector, or worse, another Cain, the consequences could be catastrophic. They descended from the watchtower and trekked across the soaked jungle floor toward the beach. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of wet vegetation and brine. Every step squelched in the saturated ground, and the occasional crash of a falling tree branch reminded them that the island was still settling after the storm's fury. When they reached the shoreline, the idol stood out like a black diamond against the pale sand. Sophia hesitated, her fingers hovering near it, while Ethan crouched to inspect the ground. The sand around the idol was undisturbed, perfectly smooth, with no footprints, no drag marks, nothing to indicate it had been washed ashore by the waves. It looked as though it had simply appeared there. Ethan wrapped it carefully in a thick canvas cloth, not daring to let his bare hands touch it. Even through the fabric, he swore he could feel a faint vibration, like the low hum of distant thunder. Marcus kept his eyes on the tree line, uneasy. "We shouldn't stay here long," he muttered under his breath, scanning the shadows. The jungle seemed to agree, growing darker as clouds gathered again, despite the early morning sun. As they made their way back to the watchtower, a loud crack echoed behind them. Something moved fast through the trees, a blur of muscle and black fur. Ethan barely had time to react before a jaguar burst from the undergrowth, its golden eyes locked on them. The predator lunged, a blur of teeth and claws, and the trio scattered instinctively. Sophia slipped behind a tree, clutching the idol to her chest, while Marcus raised his arms to look larger and distract the beast. Ethan grabbed a thick branch from the ground and stepped between the animal and Sophia. The jaguar circled, muscles rippling under its sleek fur, tail twitching with predatory focus. It lunged at Ethan, who swung the branch, striking the animal across the snout. It snarled, a sound that vibrated in his bones, and leapt again. This time, Ethan dropped low, rolling aside as Marcus hurled a flare directly at its feet. The sudden burst of red light and hissing smoke startled the creature, forcing it to retreat several paces. Sophia shouted for them to run, and they bolted through the dense foliage, not stopping until the roar of the jaguar faded into the distance. Ethan's chest heaved as he glanced back, half expecting the animal to give chase, but it didn't. Instead, it lingered at the edge of the tree line, watching them with eyes that seemed almost human in their intensity. Back at the watchtower, they regrouped, shaken but alive. Ethan carefully secured the idol in a reinforced case Marcus had rigged from salvaged gear. They all knew one thing. This artifact wasn't like anything they had encountered before. It wasn't just a relic. It was something more, something dangerous, perhaps even supernatural. As they prepared to leave the island, Ethan paused at the edge of the cliffs, looking down at the sea that had claimed Cain. Somewhere out there, secrets were still buried, secrets that might never be unearthed. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that the idol was just one piece of a puzzle spanning centuries. The boat they had used to reach the island miraculously survived the storm, tied securely on the lee side of the island. They loaded their gear and the case holding the idol, then pushed off from the shore. As the island faded into the mist behind them, Ethan stared at the case. Whatever curse clung to the idol felt heavier than the artifact itself. It had cost Cain his life and almost taken theirs. The question wasn't whether they could keep it safe, but whether it wanted to be kept at all. And in that silence between crashing waves, Ethan understood something. Their lives had changed forever the moment they stepped onto that island. Chapter 6. The Aftermath. The return voyage to the mainland was silent, broken only by the hum of the boat's engine and the steady rhythm of waves. For all their victories, none of them felt triumphant. The idol sat in its reinforced case, strapped securely to the deck, and yet its presence was palpable, as if it radiated something unseen. Sophia sat near the stern, her notebook balanced on her knees, recording every detail she could remember. But even she, the voice of optimism and reason, paused occasionally, staring at the horizon as if searching for answers that didn't exist. Marcus, ever the stoic, kept his eyes fixed on the GPS tracker, avoiding the idol altogether, his hands tightening on the wheel every time the case shifted with the boat's motion. When they finally reached the mainland, a small team of port authorities waited at the dock. Ethan had arranged their extraction through one of his contacts, keeping the mission as low profile as possible. The fewer who knew about the idol, the safer it would be. Or at least, that was the hope. As they unloaded their gear, Sophia noticed something unusual. A thin line of barnacles on the boat's hull glowed faintly in the shade, an eerie bluish hue similar to the idol's faint vibration. She called Ethan over, and they both crouched to inspect it. The glow vanished within seconds, like a mirage, but it left behind an unshakable feeling that the idol's influence extended beyond its physical form. The case was transferred to a secure facility Ethan trusted, one that specialized in storing dangerous historical artifacts. It was underground, reinforced with concrete and steel, and layered with environmental control systems. Even so, the technician who signed for it hesitated, eyeing the reinforced case like one might eye a venomous snake. In the following days, the team tried to return to some semblance of normalcy. Marcus buried himself in logistics, arranging repairs for their damaged equipment and organizing data they had gathered. Sophia analyzed the glyphs she had copied from the vault walls, connecting them to Caribbean indigenous languages and hints of West African symbology, relics of the cultural exchanges brought by centuries of piracy and trade. Ethan, however, struggled to focus. The memory of Cain's face in those final moments haunted him, not because of the man's cruelty, but because of his fear. Cain had been a predator, always in control, but in the end, he had died terrified, as though something had been waiting for him. Something beyond any curse or superstition. The idol's origins grew murkier with every lead they pursued. The glyphs hinted at an object forged not as treasure, but as a key, though to what none of them could yet say. Sophia theorized that it may have been part of a much larger construct, perhaps one spanning multiple islands. Marcus suggested handing it over to an international task force, but Ethan refused. He had seen what greed could do in Cain and his mercenaries, and he wasn't about to let bureaucracy turn the idol into a bargaining chip. Late one night, Ethan stood alone in the facility's artifact vault, staring at the case through thick, bulletproof glass. Even sealed away, it seemed alive, like it was watching him. A chill crept down his spine, one he couldn't shake off. He thought back to the jaguar on the island, the way it had hesitated before retreating, the unnatural storm, the idol's sudden appearance on the beach. None of it added up, and yet it all felt connected, as if the island itself had been protecting something ancient, something sacred. Then, just as he turned to leave, a sound echoed through the vault, a low hum, faint but unmistakable. He froze. The case didn't move, but the sound was real, vibrating through the floor and walls before fading into silence. He stood there for several seconds, waiting for it to return, but it never did. When he rejoined Sophia and Marcus upstairs, he said nothing. Instead, he focused on their next steps, analyzing the idol's metallurgy, radiocarbon dating the wooden base it had rested on in the vault, and searching for any other references in historical pirate records. A week later, a new lead surfaced. An obscure reference in a 17th century Spanish journal mentioning keys of the sea that could unlock the path of the forgotten. The words felt eerily similar to the phrases Sophia had translated from the vault. Whatever the idol was, it wasn't a treasure. It was a tool, one that could open something far larger and possibly far more dangerous. And that's when Ethan realized their work wasn't done. Cain might be gone, but someone else would come eventually. Someone always did. Greed had a way of filling voids like water, rushing into a sinking ship. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan looked at Sophia and Marcus. For all the danger they had faced, they were still standing, stronger, smarter, and bonded by something more than just shared survival. They weren't just colleagues anymore, they were family. But somewhere, deep in the ocean or buried under forgotten sands, more relics waited, connected to the idol like stars in a constellation. Ethan knew they wouldn't stay hidden forever. The curse of the idol had followed them off the island, not as a chain, but as a question. What comes next? If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Ward and want to keep learning English through more of his thrilling adventures, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. New stories are coming soon.